Ever wondered what happens when an Amish person loses their spouse? While you'd get grief counseling and time off work, Amish widows must move to tiny houses within weeks. Widowers remarry in months. No therapy, no grieving period. Just 10 strict rules controlling everything after death takes a partner. The first days. Death in Amish communities triggers immediate, well-rehearsed responses. Within hours, the community mobilizes. Women arrive to clean and prepare the body, men build a simple wooden coffin, and the church organizes a funeral for 3 days later. No funeral homes, no embalming, no professional services. The deceased gets dressed in white burial clothing and placed in the coffin in the family's living room. Community members take turns sitting with the body around the clock. The funeral happens at home with several hundred attendees, followed by burial in a simple cemetery with unmarked or minimally marked graves. Rule 1. Remarriage waiting period. Widows must wait at least 1 full year before remarrying, often longer. The community expects visible mourning and withdrawal from social life. A widow who seems eager to remarry faces harsh judgment about her character and feelings toward her deceased husband. Some communities expect 2 years of mourning before courtship can begin. Widowers face shorter waiting periods, often just 6 months. The community understands that men need wives to manage households, especially if young children need care. A widower with a toddler might remarry within months with full community approval. The double standard is explicit. Men need domestic labor. Women should demonstrate proper grief. The reasoning reflects practical necessity versus emotional propriety. Widowers without wives cannot maintain proper households. No one cooks, cleans, or cares for children adequately. Widows without husbands can still manage domestic duties, so the urgency to remarry is less and proper mourning takes priority. Rule 2. Mourning dress requirements. Widows must wear all black clothing for at least 1 year, sometimes longer. This visible marker ensures everyone knows her status and treats her accordingly. The black clothing signals to potential suitors that she's unavailable and reminds the community to provide appropriate support. Some conservative communities require 18 months to 2 years of black clothing. Widowers also wear black, but expectations are shorter and less rigidly enforced. A widower might return to regular colored clothing after 6 months without criticism. The visible marker of his loss matters less because his changed status is obvious through his need for household help. The clothing rules serve multiple purposes. They demonstrate respect for the deceased, signal unavailability for courtship, and create visible community structure showing who has lost spouses. Breaking these rules early brings harsh judgment. It suggests insufficient love for the deceased or improper eagerness to move forward. Rule 3. Property and financial control. When husbands die, widows discover that decades of farm labor don't translate into property ownership. The family farm typically passes to sons, even if she worked it for 40 years. She might receive 1/3 of the estate, with the rest divided among children. This distribution reflects the view that her support should come from children rather than independent assets. When wives die, widowers retain complete control of all property and assets. The farm remains his, the business continues under his management, and all financial assets stay in his control. His children have no claim on assets while he lives. His wife's death doesn't affect his economic position except for losing her unpaid household labor. Business assets follow similar patterns. A deceased husband's carpentry shop transfers to sons. A deceased wife's egg sales or garden produce income simply ends. It was never considered real business anyway. The property rules reveal whose labor the community values as creating lasting wealth. Rule 4. Living arrangements. Widows typically move to dowdy house, small attached dwellings on their son's property within weeks or months of their husband's death. This small space contains a bedroom, sitting area, minimal kitchen, and bathroom. Moving there means living under her son's authority with constant oversight and limited privacy. Widowers stay in the family home. There's no discussion of relocating or downsizing. The house is his property, and he continues living there exactly as before his wife's death. The only change is who performs the domestic labor within that unchanged space. Some widows without sons or whose children left the community must move in with relatives or other church families. These arrangements work practically but emphasize her lack of independent options. Remaining in the family home independently is rare and requires church leader approval. Rule 5. Expectations. Widows must continue all domestic duties despite grief. Within weeks of the funeral, she's expected to resume cooking, cleaning, and caring for any children at home. If she lives in a dowdy house, she helps her son's wife with household chores, childcare, and food preservation, earning her keep through labor. Widowers must maintain farms or businesses without interruption. However, female relatives immediately step in to provide cooking, cleaning, and laundry services. This help is understood as temporary until he remarries, but it means his daily life continues with minimal disruption beyond emotional loss. The community provides meals for both widows and widowers during the first week or two. After that, widows must cook for themselves or rely on children. Widowers continue receiving help from rotating female relatives who recognize he cannot properly feed himself or maintain a household alone. Rule 6. Courtship and dating rules. When widows eventually court again, they follow supervised courtship rules similar to first marriages. Meetings happen in public or with family present. Hand-holding and physical contact remain forbidden until marriage. She must obtain family approval, typically from her adult sons, before accepting courtship from a man. Widowers court with far more freedom. Courtships are brief, often just weeks, because both parties understand marriage realities and need practical partnerships rather than romantic love. Physical propriety matters less for mature adults marrying practically. His courtship decisions need no family approval. The remarriage market differs dramatically. Widowers choose from many options: younger widows, older single women, women from other communities. Widows face limited options because there are more widows than widowers. Available men are typically much older or widowers themselves with specific household needs. Rule 7. Children's care obligations. Widows raising children alone face immense pressure. She must provide all child care, maintain household standards, and ensure children's spiritual development without a father's authority. Teenage sons might resist her discipline, and the church expects her to seek male relatives' help in controlling them. Widowers with young children face intense pressure to remarry quickly. Small children need mothers. This is stated explicitly. A widower with an infant is expected to remarry within months to provide proper maternal care. His personal grief becomes secondary to children's needs for female nurturing. Blended families create complex dynamics. When widows remarry, they join the widower's household with their children, adapting to his established routines. When widowers remarry, they bring a new wife into their home to care for his children. She adapts to his household, not the reverse. Rule 8. Church service attendance. Both widows and widowers must attend every Sunday service despite grief. Missing church suggests wavering faith, which is particularly concerning during times when people might question God's will. Attendance demonstrates acceptance of God's plan and commitment to community, even during personal tragedy. Widows sit in designated areas with other widows, visibly marked by their black clothing. This seating arrangement reminds everyone of their status and ensures appropriate treatment. Widowers sit in normal men's sections, their widower status less publicly emphasized. Public versus private mourning differs by gender. Widows must demonstrate grief visibly through clothing and behavior. Widowers can grieve privately while maintaining public normalcy. A widower laughing at a community event 3 months after his wife's death faces little judgment. A widow doing the same would shock the community. Rule 9. Inheritance distribution. When husbands die, estates get divided with roughly 1/3 to the widow and 2/3 to children. Sons typically receive farmland and business assets, while daughters receive household goods and cash. The widow's portion rarely allows independent living. It's meant to supplement support from children. When wives die, there's no estate division. Everything already belongs to the husband and nothing changes. He continues controlling all assets, making all financial decisions, and planning inheritance for children on his own timeline without input from anyone. Church leaders mediate inheritance disputes, but their authority matters mainly for widow situations. They ensure sons don't take everything and leave their mother destitute. For widowers, there's nothing to mediate, it's all his property anyway. Rule 10. Remarriage partner selection. Widows need family approval for remarriage, particularly from adult sons. A son can effectively veto his mother's remarriage if he believes the man unsuitable or if remarriage would complicate his inheritance. Her preferences matter less than family consensus about the match's propriety. Widowers need no one's approval. He evaluates potential wives based on cooking skills, household management abilities, compatibility with his children, and personal attraction. His children might have opinions, but the decision is entirely his. He's choosing an employee as much as a companion. Age and status considerations differ sharply. An older widow marrying a younger man would cause scandal. An older widower marrying a much younger widow is acceptable and even approved. He's providing her security, she's providing him domestic labor. The exchange makes practical sense to communities valuing function over romance. The emotional toll. The rules focus on practical matters, housing, property, remarriage, timelines, but ignore the emotional devastation widows and widowers actually experience. Amish culture discourages open discussion of feelings, viewing excessive grief as questioning God's will. Widows and widowers must process loss privately while maintaining public composure and meeting community expectations. Depression, anxiety, and trauma go unaddressed because mental health concepts don't exist in traditional Amish understanding. A widow struggling to function gets told to pray more and trust God's plan. A widower showing ongoing sadness months later faces suggestions that remarriage would solve his problems. The community offers practical support meals, farm help, housing, but emotional support remains limited to platitudes about God's will. Many suffer silently for years, especially widows who lack the remarriage escape that widowers enjoy. The loneliness intensifies when living in dotty house, dependent on children who have their own families and priorities. Some develop physical ailments from suppressed grief. Others simply endure, accepting that their feelings matter less than maintaining community standards and not burdening others with complaints about circumstances everyone faces eventually. Leaving the community. Some widows and widowers choose to leave Amish life entirely rather than follow these restrictive rules. This decision typically happens after experiencing the stark inequality firsthand. Widows who lose everything despite decades of contribution, or widowers pressured into remarriages they don't want. Leaving means losing family contact, community support, and the only life they've known. Widows who leave often do so for economic survival. Facing poverty within the community, some seek outside employment and eventually realize they can't maintain Amish standards while working in the English world. The transition is brutal, learning to drive, managing technology, navigating systems they never encountered. But some find freedom and independence they could never achieve as Amish widows. Widowers rarely leave because the system advantages them. However, some leave after being pressured into remarriages they didn't want or after watching their mothers or sisters treated poorly as widows. These men sacrifice property and status because they can't accept the inequality they witness. The community views these departures as spiritual failures rather than systemic problems, never questioning whether the rules themselves drive people away. The reality of widowhood. Widowhood reveals the fundamental inequality in Amish gender relations. Men lose companions but retain property, autonomy, and status. Women lose security, independence, and often their homes. The rules don't just differ, they create fundamentally unequal outcomes based on gender. Loneliness affects both widows and widowers, but support differs. Communities rally around widowers with meals, childcare help, and matchmaking efforts. Widows receive short-term meal support, then expectations to manage independently or move in with children. The urgency to help widowers reveals whose complete households the community values. Economic pressures force widows into dependence on children or remarriage to unsuitable partners. Widowers maintain or improve their financial positions, remarrying from strength rather than desperation. The financial disparity ensures women never achieve independence even after decades of marriage. Amish widowhood operates under rules that seem harsh to modern observers: no counseling, compressed grief timelines, and rigid expectations that don't accommodate individual circumstances. These rules reflect beliefs that community standards matter more than personal feelings, and that maintaining structure helps people survive loss better than unlimited grieving. The gender disparity, however, reveals whose comfort communities prioritize. Widowers keep homes, property, and status while seeking domestic managers. Widows lose homes, most assets, and independence while hoping someone offers security through remarriage. The rules restore male-led households quickly, often at tremendous cost to widows who've spent decades contributing to families and communities.